Let's begin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chip Michaels. I'm the Chief Security Officer of the Jewish Federation at Greater Metro West. Thank you for joining. In the wake of this very difficult time following the atrocities committed by Hamas within Israeli borders on October 7th, given the number of casualties, which is currently estimated to be over 1,300, the level of barbarity of these murders, and the fact that 100 hostages have been taken into Gaza, we expect this to be a long, drawn-out conflict. Based on the history of this region, the actions started by Hamas will lead to countless innocent lives being lost on both sides, which in turn will aggravate tensions that will reverberate across the world. Furthermore, with the growing influence of social media and its misinformation, it's likely to fuel more polarization in parts of the population here in New Jersey and across the U.S. As a result, many of our community members have started to question their and their family's safety. With that in mind, the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness has graciously agreed to provide us with an intelligence briefing on the current threat landscape in New Jersey, which will be followed by a review of best security practices. Please place your questions in the Q&A feature, and we'll try to answer them all. At the end of the program, there will be links to donate and a link to our security resources. It's now my pleasure to introduce Director Tom Houck. Tom is the Division Director for Intelligence and Operations in New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness. Prior to New Jersey Office of Homeland Preparedness, Tom had a brilliant career in the Federal Bureau of Investigations. Mr. Houck, please take it away, sir.
Thank you, Chip. I'd first like to thank the entire Federation for partnering with OHSP today. We appreciate it. And specifically, I'd like to thank Chip for all of his coordination to make this happen. I've seen the many emails and last-minute changes, so thank you, Chip, for staying flexible and keeping in stride with all of that. On behalf of NJOHSP, as well as myself personally, our thoughts and prayers are with all of you, but especially those who have family, friends, and/or coworkers who were killed, captured, or missing. They and you are on the top of our minds. Currently, there's no known credible or specific threats to New Jersey. However, in conjunction with our federal, state, county, and local partners, we continue to monitor the situation. More importantly than just monitoring, we are proactively looking for threats so we can detect them and mitigate them before they are actually carried out. So that's the important piece. Key to this effort is our NJ-SARS program, which stands for New Jersey Suspicious Activity Reporting System. I want to take a minute for those in the audience who aren't familiar with NJ-SARS, just so you understand the process. As suspicious activity reports are received by NJOHSP, we have a trained team that vets those reports, establishes the credibility, and they will then make a determination based on criteria we have, whether that will become an official SAR or suspicious activity report or not. If it is deemed to be a SAR, it is entered into our system. One step we will take is to compare all of the data from that SAR, addresses, people, license plates, phone numbers, whatever data we have that we can use to compare. We will look at our SAR holdings and see if there's any other previous reports that have a connection to that current report. From there, that report will automatically and electronically go from NJ-SARS to the FBI eGuardian system. And the eGuardian system is merely the FBI's threat intake system, much like our SARS. They will then vet that report. They will compare it to their holdings to see if there's any other links between that current report and any of the holdings and cases and investigations and operations throughout the Bureau worldwide. We have full-time task force officers embedded with the FBI. Those are NJOHSP detectives who sit at and work full-time with the FBI. Once that SAR goes to the FBI and to their eGuardian and the FBI vets that, one of two things will happen with that. One could be the FBI retains that report. That means they're going to keep it and they're going to investigate it at the federal level, and our task force officers that sit with them will assist with that investigation. The second thing that could happen is that report may not reach the FBI's threshold or criteria for them to predicate an investigation, or it could just be a bandwidth issue. That report could then be relinquished back to NJOHSP. And at Hamilton, where our headquarters is in Hamilton, New Jersey, we have a cadre of full-time detectives, and they will then take that relinquished SAR and they will investigate it until we get to a resolution for that particular SAR. And in addition to investigating those reports that come in, they're also constantly engaged with our human source base to glean any information we can about threats that are out there. So a couple questions you should have is, what is suspicious activity and how do we report it? So I'm not going to go through all 15 indicators of threats, but what I will do is point you to our website, njohsp.gov. If you go on there and you scroll down, there'll be a link to report suspicious activity. Click on that link, and then you can scroll down to what you'll see, an indicator sheet. And there's 15 indicators spelled out there as to what we consider suspicious activity. And that should plant some seeds in your head as to what types of things should I report if I see them. So the second question is, how do you report that? So part of NJOSP is our Counterterrorism Watch Unit, or CT Watch we call it. They are open for business 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's where these suspicious activity reports would go, and we would intake them. And you can either email it to tips@njohsp.gov, tips@njohsp.gov, or you could call it in to 866-4-SAFE New Jersey, 866-4, the number 4, SAFE New Jersey. You can find both the link and the phone number on our website, njohsp.gov. Another big part of our effort to detect and mitigate these threats is our outreach. And a big mechanism of outreach we have here at OHSP is our Interfaith Advisory Council. We have about 4,000 members throughout the state of all religious denominations. Our Detective Chowdhury, most of you who do know him, he goes by Izzy. He spearheads that effort, and that is a robust program we have here, and it's very useful for us to not only get information from the faith-based community, but also for us to push information out. It's a two-way street. I'd also like to just talk about another division with NJOHSP called the New Jersey Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Cell, better known as NJKIC. They are always and actively tracking state-sponsored actors, hacktivists, and criminals who are spreading misinformation and disinformation about the history of the current conflict, motives of each party, use of weapons, number of casualties, and what is the purpose for them doing this? It's a few things. They're trying to sow social discord, incite violence, undermine public trust in institutions and the government. Another big piece that they're tracking in conjunction with the current developments is some online scams that are attempting to solicit money for various conflict-related fraudulent causes. So, I heard Chip talk about donations. You're looking for dollars that you have a very good cause to spend them on that are going to help people. There's opportunists out there who are trying to take advantage of this crisis to draw money in and take it for their own greed. So you just want to be careful with that as well. At this point, I want to introduce Casey Hettinger and to thank her. She'll be conducting an intel brief this afternoon. So again, our prayers are with all of you, and we really appreciate the partnership. This is really what makes things get done effectively, is by working together. So thank you, Chip, and the whole Federation for having us today.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Give me one moment to get this situated. All right. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. My name is Casey Hettinger. I'm an intelligence analyst with the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness, and I've been asked to provide you with a high-level overview of the current state of the Israel-Hamas war and how it impacts us here in the States, specifically within New Jersey. All right, so there's a lot that we could talk about, and we could get pretty into the weeds if time allowed. But for today's purposes, my goal here is to share what is occurring in Israel and how it has and will continue to impact us here. I'm going to provide a very brief intro into the onset of the conflict and then dive into what has happened in the last week as the fighting has continued. We will discuss Hamas, look at the global response to the war, and then bring it home to how this has impacted the nation and the state in the form of extremist responses, and then what the outlook for that may be going forward. Please keep in mind during this briefing that events are constantly unfolding and information or assessments with a forward-looking focus could be obsolete as soon as the end of the day, as is kind of something that happens with these types of events. The most important thing that I want to highlight is that the New Jersey Regional Operations and Intelligence Center, also the NJROC, and our office, the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness, have no information for indicating any specific or credible threats or public safety concerns to New Jersey regarding the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. I really just want to reiterate that before we start off. All right, so while Israel and Palestine, specifically Hamas, have a very long and complicated history, this past year has seen an increasing amount of activity, and the scale of the current conflict is the largest that the region has seen in 50 years. At approximately 6 a.m. local time last Saturday, October 7th, the foreign terrorist organization Hamas and a wide range of Palestinian extremist militants launched a massive coordinated assault against Israel, using rockets, gunfire, edged weapons, and kidnapping in a series of ongoing mass casualty attacks throughout southern and central Israel. The U.S. government is actively working to verify reports that American citizens are among the casualties and the captives, and the Israeli Prime Minister has publicly stated that the nation is at war, and the Israeli Defense Forces are actively engaged in counterterrorism airstrikes in response. The surprise Hamas attack on Saturday, October 7th, did come the day after the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, also known as the 1973 war, in which Syria and Egypt launched a surprise attack against Israel, hoping to regain losses from the Six-Day War back in 1967. The attack also comes on the heels of an Israeli-Saudi agreement that would have had lasting impacts on the political landscape in the Middle East. So as I said earlier, events are constantly unfolding, and information and assessments with a forward-looking focus could be obsolete as early as the end of the day. But with that in mind, currently the casualty counts for all sides, including Americans, are listed here on the slide at 1,400 killed for Israel, roughly about 2,700 killed from Gaza, and we do have 30 American citizens currently killed during the conflict as well. As of this morning, Israel is preparing to begin its ground offensive into Gaza, as a large number of Israeli troops have amassed just outside of Gaza. In anticipation, Israel issued an evacuation order for Palestinians in northern Gaza and Gaza City. Israel is also mobilizing over 300,000 reservists in the war against Hamas. Some of these troops have allegedly already been stationed at the northern border with Lebanon, which was recently declared a closed military zone by Israel over the weekend. Fighting with Hezbollah has begun to increase, despite the U.S. having been adamant about Iran and Hezbollah remaining out of the conflict in force. And that as of recently, the U.S. has affirmed its support of Israel in the war with the arrival of U.S. Secretary Blinken in Israel last week. And then also we've seen Hamas abduct over 190 people, I believe the current count is, and place them inside Gaza to impede Israeli operations. And it is said that it will execute the hostages if Israel continues to bombard civilian homes in Gaza. Hamas says it will not negotiate on the hostages until the end of the battle, and Israel has said that the siege of Gaza will not end until the Israeli hostages are released. So for context, I really just wanted to provide a brief background on Hamas. Hamas is an acronym for an Arabic phrase meaning the Islamic Resistance Movement, which was founded in 1987 as an offshoot of the Palestinian Muslim Brotherhood. In 1988, the group published the Hamas Charter, stating its primary objective was to end Israel's occupation of Palestinian territory and create an Islamic state throughout Palestine. The U.S. Department of State designated Hamas a foreign terrorist organization in 1997 after its armed element began conducting attacks against Israeli civilians in pursuit of its goal to establish a Palestinian state. So since 2007, Hamas has served as the governing authority of the Gaza Strip. In 2017, the group created a new policy document to kind of supplement its original 1988 charter. And in that document, Hamas did reaffirm that its conflict to Israel was due to occupation and that it was still seeking for that Palestinian state. So in addition to its overseas operations, Hamas has been the influence of homegrown violent extremists here in the US and including in New Jersey. So in May of 2020, authorities originally arrested Jason Fong on weapons charges, but it was later revealed that he was attempting to provide funds to Hamas. In May of 2019, authorities charged Jonathan Z of Basking Ridge up in Somerset County with attempting to provide material support to Hamas after he sent money to an individual he believed to be a member of the group. Additionally, authorities observed Z outside Trump Tower in New York City shortly before he posted on social media that he wanted to attack that location, or he did specifically list the Israeli consulate general. Now, this is largely the case when it comes to Hamas supporters, especially in the US. Since their main conflict is directly with Israel, they aren't typically very interested in us here in the States. So their supporters do typically just provide funding for their operations overseas, and they are not really engaging in violence here in the homeland. So while Israel and Hamas continue to fight, the rest of the world has been gathering in demonstrations, rallies, and vigils that are both pro-Israeli or pro-Palestinian. Reports of heightened tensions across the US as pro-Palestine and pro-Israel counter-protests and rallies were held in areas such as Atlanta, Chicago, New York City, San Francisco, and Washington, D.C. Since last Saturday, protesters clashed in New York City. We saw them breaching police barricades that have been put up to separate the two factions, with reports suggesting that things like swastikas were seen among placards displayed by pro-Palestinian protesters. In Atlanta, we saw pro-Palestine protesters calling for the end of aid to Israel after the U.S. deployed the USS Gerald R. Ford into the region. And in Europe, 40 people were arrested following clashes between pro-Palestinian protesters and police in Berlin, Germany. Police in London as well also stepped up patrols following several anti-Semitic incidents. And I don't know if you guys were aware, but on October 10th, which was Friday, a former Hamas leader called for demonstrations for Friday, October 13th, in support of Hamas attacks in Israel. The leader called for Muslims, especially those in neighboring countries, to send a message of anger and that they stand with Palestine. Thankfully, not much amounted to that call, but the possibility exists for more calls of a similar nature in the future. So kind of pivoting a little bit to more of that domestic extremist response, white racially motivated extremists online have officially come out and declared support for the Palestinians and kind of have been just throwing rhetoric out there stating that anyone suggesting neutrality in the conflict would be considered Israeli intelligence. They have been tying the Palestinian liberation to white liberation and claimed that Israel is the source of issues such as immigration or even the current state of the US economy. Comments to these online posts have openly advocated for violence against the Jewish community, calling this a war for existence and blaming the Jewish population for attacks against resources and education, anything that they can kind of make stick, really. And a member of a New Jersey-based white supremacist group recently complained online that these attacks will cause privileged Jews to come to America and kind of jump to the head of the line of resources, which is typical for rhetoric when we've seen these types of individuals. White racially motivated extremists generally do pose a high threat to New Jersey, as supporters of their ideology have demonstrated their willingness and capability to carry out attacks. They do a good job, unfortunately, of directing and inspiring sympathizers online, and they do attempt to network globally. Extremists also regularly alter online propaganda to capitalize on global events and spread disinformation that perpetuates their violent ideologies. So conspiracy theorists online have begun circulating disinformation and misinformation, claiming that the US and Israel allowed Hamas's offensive on Israel to occur. They also allege that Hamas is using weapons that were originally sent to Ukraine or left behind after the US withdrawal. and that something such as the deep state has allowed the attack to happen to distract from things such as the war in Ukraine, investigations into former President Donald Trump, and other just miscellaneous kind of undefined failures. We do also see white racially motivated extremists use memes, graphics, and images to communicate, express, and spread propaganda to their supporters. We've seen that in previous instances, like the COVID pandemic, and they're kind of doing the same thing now when it comes to the Israel-Hamas war. Shifting gears a little bit away from the domestic extremists, foreign terrorist organizations such as Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, Ras al-Din, and Al-Shabaab have issued statements praising Hamas and all Palestinian militants and encouraging Muslims in neighboring countries to assist and draw inspiration from the offensive, calling Israel's campaign against Gaza actually a war against Islam and its people. Supporters of these groups online have also begun calling for lone wolf strikes against the Jewish population as well. FTOs will continue to attempt to capitalize on this issue. Kind of over the last 10 years, Al-Qaeda and ISIS have used the Palestinian cause to call actors to violence. So we should be aware, though, that any violent threat perceived here is not likely going to be a member of Hamas, but is likely someone to have been radicalized by material that kind of exploits the Palestinian cause and uses that as a justification for violence. This is not really surprising. We've seen this before and will likely continue as the war endures. So finally, one thing to kind of be mindful of that we are seeing a lot of is the mass amount of disinformation that is being released by bad actors. There are years-old images of bombed Syrian cities that are falsely being reported as images of Gaza. There's other posts online falsely claiming that Israel bombed Gaza's oldest church. This is the type of activity is throwing just more fuel on the fire and kind of putting our communities here in New Jersey at an increased risk. So please be cognizant and verify and check your sources as we kind of push out, especially with social media now. In closing, I do want to reiterate that there are no known or credible threats in New Jersey due to the conflict in Israel at this time. However, this situation has the potential to fuel violent altercations between those with opposing viewpoints, especially as international and domestic extremists kind of continue to exploit these events overseas to further their ideological goals. So the longer the war continues, the more time is allowed for grievances and tensions to increase, which may manifest in the forms of rallies with counter-protesters or isolated violent incidents among individuals that are really consuming these propagandas, which urges them to retaliate at home. It's kind of the biggest thing that we're like keeping eyes on as we move forward as this war kind of continues. So that is what we have been observing and what we will continue to review as we move forward in the coming weeks. And we encourage you, as Tom had said earlier, to please say something if you see something. These are a couple of our numbers here. So if you have any questions for us at OHS&P, you can reach out via these links. Our website has a lot of really good resources there. And if you see something, you can call that Safe New Jersey number or just email us at tips@njohsp.gov. That is all I have for today. So I will pass the mic back to Chip and I will stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Houghton. Thank you, Casey, for that enlightening and informative briefing. Your partnership and cooperation that we have with NJOHSP is greatly appreciated. And thank you so much for always being there for us. Thank you. What I'd like to step and take a move towards is just kind of reminding everyone out there about best practices, right? So the baseline for me is just remembering your security fundamentals. Number one for me for access for synagogues and our agencies is access control. A couple points to just touch on is trying to control that single point of entry and exit. Try to maintain that. Inspecting the building's exteriors prior to service. Posting a capable guardian at open doors during entry and dismissal. Right. Think day schools and early childhood centers is most important. Fortunately, and I'm really happy to see when I kind of go out there and I touch base with our early childhood centers, everyone's really following best practices and taking this stuff to heart. So I greatly appreciate all the work that's being done out there. Visibly armed security officers posted outside the entrances, right? We want those bad actors to know that we have armed security for the places that do. Trained greeters posted within eyesight of that armed security officer is also a best practice and highly recommended. I know Director Howe talked about talked about suspicious activity. So maintaining situational awareness for suspicious activity. Really, folks, it's about knowing the baseline. You know what the baseline is for your synagogue. You know what the baseline is for your neighborhood. You know what's unusual and what's not. So what we're looking to do is we're trying to identify that unusual behavior and, most importantly, saying something to someone. Don't just assume that someone else is going to report it, or maybe it's not a big deal. That could be the little missing piece that investigators are looking for to put together into a larger, possibly to a larger situation. Another suspicious activity could be attempts to access your facility. Someone walking around trying doors, seeing if they're open. Unusual questions. These are questions that are in person, by phone, by text, or email. Again, a lot of times we think, wow, that's weird. Well, it's weird because it is different. So we need to report that. We need to start putting these pieces together and working together. Evasive answers to questions. That doesn't mean that someone's lying, but if they're being evasive, that's probably something that should lead to additional questions. Identifying vehicles, noticing identical vehicles, making numerous passes around your facility, possibly at a slow rate of speed. Try to make note of that license plate. If you can't get the license plate, try to get a description of the vehicle itself and possibly the occupants of that vehicle, and reporting them to your local police. And lastly, I'd like to touch on is being aware of unattended or suspicious packages. Identify them, don't touch them, notify law enforcement immediately. Another piece that's really important for us is establishing relationships with law enforcement. Inviting your local law enforcement into your facility to tour your facility, relaying the concerns that you might have, and really just asking them the what ifs. Hey, officer, what if this happened? What can I expect your response to look like? Or what's your best recommendation if this happens? What do you think we should do? Having those we call them blue sky conversations, right? When there's no pressure on, that's the time you want to have that facial recognition and have those questions. You don't want to have those questions when there's an incident. Following your security plans. If you haven't established a security plan, now this is an institutional one, a professional one, and a private one. Right? I always, if you've ever attended my trainings, I always say, before I go into a restaurant or as I walk into a restaurant, I always look for where those exits are. And then I sit down and order a glass of Chardonnay. Don't wait for something to happen for me to figure out. I don't want to know where the exit is when something bad's happening. So creating those, reviewing your emergency operation plans, creating your emergency operation plans, and a really important piece, sharing those emergency operation plans with your local law enforcement. Let them know what your response is going to be. Again, regarding emergency operation plans, establishing what person will make decisions during a crisis. Not only just establishing who's going to be in charge, but establishing lines of succession when that decision maker is absent or unavailable. Make sure we know who the second in command is and who we're going to follow. So recently, what we've and again, which is fantastic. We've been a part of numerous rallies and get-togethers supporting Israel and the war that's going on. So it's really great that we want to get together and have these events, but we need to create a security plan for the event. And again, it starts with establishing who is responsible for the decision making and who that successor is. Once we've established what we want to do, we want to collaborate with law enforcement during the planning process, not afterwards. We want law enforcement involved right from its inception so we can get their buy-in and get their expertise to help plan these events. Consider having the event space cleared by by canines, explosive detective teams. So one of the reasons I highly recommend we do this beforehand, and then we have law enforcement present during the event, because just think about it. If law enforcement is present when that event venue is cleared by a canine, and we do have a swatting incident, or a bomb threat call, law enforcement may be less likely to evacuate it because of that call, because they're aware that it's cleared, they're aware that they've been present the whole time. Just consider it. When we're having special events, message out to your attendees that luggage, backpacks, parcels, and purses are prohibited from entering. It's just a best practice to help minimize some risk to everyone there. Once you do that, make sure you establish a bag check inspection protocol. Make sure all of your security personnel are aware what that protocol is. Practice it before you start the event. Consider utilizing magnetometers at the entry point if you think it's going to be a really high volume event, if you haven't pre-registered. And again, speaking of pre-registering, we want you to utilize a pre-registration platform, some sort of electronic platform that people need to go in and register their names. It's another layer. It's not an end-all be-all, but it's another layer of security to help vet people that might be coming. And if you are going to allow walk-ins, have a protocol established. Maybe walk-ins have to provide a photo identification, and you're going to record their name and you're going to record some of that information. Again, it's just trying to create that extra level of protection. We talk about live streaming, whether it's going to be services or events. Folks, best practices. We have some resources I'll share with you on our resource page. But avoid unprotected live stream events. Don't just have them open to the public. That's where a lot of these problems are coming from. When we say have them protected, password protect the live stream, or email the link for the live stream directly to the intended audience. And again, try to keep that email to the later as late as possible, so that people don't, whether intended, well intended or not, they share that link. We want to keep that specific to the person receiving it. Personal conduct outside of kind of what we're speaking about right now, folks, just keep aware. As you travel in urban areas, if you see a crowd gathering, walk the other direction or across the street. Make sure you're registered for our GMW alert system to receive accurate information. And this is a big one, folks, and I know Casey touched on this for almost a whole slide. Nice job, by the way, Casey. Please do not share unverified, inflammatory, or shocking social media posts. Instead, report them to your local law enforcement. And if you're not sure if you should be reporting it to law enforcement, feel free to report it to me, and I'll help pass it along. Don't engage and if you do see these kind of shocking media posts, please do not engage or respond to offensive, inflammatory social media posts. By responding to these posts, this can result in escalating the rhetoric or behavior and allows anti-Semites, in their mind, a voice and an audience. Let's not give them a voice. Let's not give them an audience. Report that behavior to law enforcement or report it to me, and I'll help pass it along. Lastly, I just want to talk about safe handling of mail-in packages. Suspicious packages, packages that are labeled with words such as personal or private, mail from a sender which is unexpected, mail-in packages with distorted handwriting, name or addresses prepared with homemade labels or cut and paste lettering, unknown absent return addresses that you don't know it's from, excessive postage, residual staining or discolored wires protruding from it. Folks, when we receive any sort of mail like this, or packages like this, just refuse to accept them. Just have the post office come and get them. Tell them that you're concerned about it and you do not want it. But most importantly, avoid handling these suspicious items that you really believe that might be dangerous, and call 911 immediately. Well, thank you for that. And what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to kind of pivot and switch gears, because we've asked to have some questions. We've asked to have some questions posed to us beforehand to try to be cognizant of everyone's time and try to expedite this. So I kind of like to read off a couple of questions that I got that I thought were really good. One of the questions that we received was, will synagogues receive additional security? And if so, what type? Well, I can tell you the Federation cannot provide additional security personnel for all of our 100 plus facilities. I'm sorry, it's just unfeasible and we can't do it. What we will do is make you more secure through our GMW security pathway, through vulnerability assessments, grant applications to enhance our physical security and high security personnel, and comprehensive security response training. We can build a resilient community ready to respond effectively to any potential threats. Another question here is how do I receive alerts? At a minimum, your leadership should be signed up for our GMW alert system. We communicate emergent threats through that system, so please ensure that your leadership at a minimum is registered for those alerts. If you're interested in receiving those alerts, you can also go on our webpage and sign up yourself. How is security coordinated with other agencies? Great question. I love this one. We maintain an ongoing communication, as you saw today, with NJOSP, all our local law enforcement, state and federal partners, along with the other Jewish security services that throughout New Jersey and New York City. What do you suggest when you no longer have family in your life and foundation support and don't have the financial means to belong to a synagogue during this time when you need Jews around you? That's a great question. I recommend exploring the Federation's inclusive programs and events that offer opportunities to connect with the Jewish community, even without synagogue membership. These gatherings provide a welcoming space for individuals seeking Jewish connections, regardless of their financial situation or family support. This person that sent it, please email me directly, and I'll make sure I get you in contact with the right people here. What are the best weapons you recommend carrying in general for someone who doesn't have a carrying permit with respect to self-defense? Folks, your best weapon is the same one that served me for 28 years in law enforcement. That's your wits. Maintaining situational awareness and recognizing a threat and reacting to that threat is always your best defense. The method taught by us, by our security team, is run, hide, fight. If you haven't received our training, again, please reach out to me and I'll make sure that the next training class, you're aware of where it is. And whatever shul or whatever agency you belong to, I'll reach out to them and see if we can set something up to make your life a little easier. Jewish day school security. Well, I can tell you last Friday, when all those posts were going around, the first thing I did when I got up is I went and I visited our day schools. I tried to catch them all for drop off, but we're spread out a little thin, so I only caught a couple of them. And I can tell you what I saw. What I saw was so reassuring. I saw schools following their protocols. I saw enhanced security, and some places that actually kind of revamped their protocols and kind of rethought what they were doing there to make it a little better. And that's exactly the kind of things that we talk. That's exactly what we talk about. Having that type of flexibility, exactly what we want during this changing threat landscape. It was great to see. I want to post a sign on my home property that shows support of Israel. Some people say that this would invite vandalism or acts of violence. What are my thoughts? Well, my thoughts is we should never hide who we are. We should never be ashamed of who we are. I don't believe a lawn sign increases the likelihood of violence at your front door. I don't believe it does. However, that doesn't preclude some use possibly vandalizing that sign. And I think we run that risk no matter what it is. If you reside in an urban area, okay, it might be a little more likely that that sign will get vandalized. But me personally, I don't think there's any larger threat than that. I want to learn about local security at my temples or JCC. Well, whoever submitted this, I would direct you to your local institution to learn about your security procedures. But don't be surprised if they don't share all the details. Just remember, folks, a security plan kind of needs to remain secret a little bit. Your security plan needs to remain secure, so they may not give you all the details. How can we pledge support for Israel without jeopardizing our safety here at home in New Jersey? Well, I can tell you contributing to the Federation's campaign or other recognized Jewish charity is probably your best way to do it. Have you received tangible intel that Hamas or any terror organization are looking to execute or influence individuals or execute attacks on Jewish targets here at home? Well, we just heard it. We just sat through Casey's intel brief, and the answer to that is no. Heaven forbid there's an incident on a Saturday or Yom Tov. How will the emergency notifications be distributed if those synagogues are offline? Well, this is a really good one, and it's a super important one. The Orthodox Union Advocacy Center has identified a device, and I've seen it work. It's very effective, and it's pretty cool. It's a device provided by Relay Incorporated, RELAY Inc. That's essentially, it's a receiving device that can alert you or your shul's designee to urgent security information. The Relay device is a small and unobtrusive and can be located in the most practical place within the shul, or it can be carried by a designee. If you're interested in the Relay system, email me. I'd be more than happy to share all the company information with you. It's a great device. You may also, if that's not something you're interested in, and maybe you might want to consider having a deeper conversation with your clergy and see if you can allow a cell device to be carried by designated persons. It's a deeper conversation you're going to have internally. Can New Jersey enact measures so people can acquire firearm protection as threats seem to be increasing? There's already a system in place to apply and receive firearms. I would caution armed congregants. I would say that armed congregants are not the answer. Planning and training, I believe, is a better solution. Sound planning and congregant participation in your security plans are far more effective and safer for everyone. Are there any venues through which the clergy can offer emotional support to those affected? We do have resources for you. Please reach out to me and I'll be happy to connect you with those resources. Should we be careful on social media in terms of commenting on articles or pictures? We already covered that. Absolutely. Exercising caution on social media when commenting on sensitive topics is crucial. Remember, a story may be sensationalized or contain disinformation. It's essential to verify the credibility of sources and information before engaging discussion or sharing content. What's your take? Here's the last one that was submitted. What's your take on wearing Jewish jewelry in public? My kids do. It comes back to situational awareness, folks. If you feel uncomfortable in an area, that's a million years of evolution whispering in your ear. Listen to it and trust it. Trust those instincts and leave or avoid that area if possible. Thank you. Do we have any other questions that have been submitted during this?
Hi, Chip. Yes. So the first one, do you have a list of basic security principles we can review with our staff? We received a comprehensive security briefing last year, but we may want to revisit during a staff meeting. Absolutely.
The points that I just went over, I'll have them available on our resource page.
And then, Chip, this one I think goes back to the lawn signs, similar kind of question. Is it unwise to have an Israeli flag in your window?
No. Same
answer.
For the same answer as before.
Fantastic. And then others are kind of general. Can we get recordings on of the Zoom call? And then obviously, how can people reach you? So we've sorry.
Okay, I'm sorry, this Zoom meeting will be posted. It will be posted and available on our resource page. And what was the last one, Dorit? I'm sorry. After the Zoom call?
Just how we can reach you. So I've put up your email address in the comments.
Excellent. And that's how best way to reach me, folks. If you can reach me by email, please do. Please do. No questions too small or insignificant. I'll be more than happy to field it.
Fantastic. And I think you kind of covered everything.
Excellent. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for being here. And now I'd like to take the time and introduce Brett Tansman. Brett Tansman is our security chair for our GMW Community Security Initiative. Brett, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Chip, and thank you, Tom and Casey, for your valuable insight and for all that you do to protect us. I know all of you are working around the clock to keep us safe, and for that, we are incredibly grateful. I am Brett Tansman, as Chip said, and I serve on the board of the Greater Metro West Federation and chair its Security Advisory Council. I know these last 9 days have been incredibly painful and we are all feeling so many emotions. Many of you have asked what we are doing as a Greater Metro West Federation to protect our schools, our synagogues, and our institutions. As you heard from Chip, there is a lot happening behind the scenes, but we need more resources to assist the over 80 synagogues, the 20+ institutions and agencies, the multiple early childhood centers, and our 4 day schools located throughout Greater Metro West. The anxiety is real, and as a father of 3 young girls, 2 in a day school and 1 in an early childhood center program, last Friday, as was alluded to earlier, with very scary rumors flying, we had to decide whether or not we should send our kids to school. I was and am comforted to know that our school has consulted with Federation and has security plans in place. We need to make sure that every school, every synagogue, and every Jewish institution in Greater Metro West has a security plan. As a board member of the Jewish Federations of North America, I was so proud last week to be a part of an emergency meeting where we approved a resolution to kick off a $500 million emergency campaign for Israel, to which Greater Metro West will be asked to raise its fair share on top of an already difficult annual campaign which supports our ongoing programs locally and overseas. This is the time we all need to dig deeper than we ever have before. The support of our annual campaign helps with our community security initiative, which takes a significant amount of resources to provide the infrastructure needed to keep all of our institutions safe, especially in the wake of these unprecedented events and the rise of anti-Semitism. Simply put, we need all of your help, and it is in times like these where we see the true power of the collective and our collective responsibility to one another. This work is only possible through your continued support of Federation. And so this upcoming Shabbos, we read Parsha Noach. In this Parsha, we read about the great flood that wiped out almost all of humanity except for Noah and 2 members of each animal species. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs of blessed memory notes that Noah is the only individual in Tanakh described as righteous, as Tzaddik. Yet, Rabbi Sachs is critical of Noah and says that he failed the test of collective responsibility. Rabbi Sachs goes on to say that the Hasidim had a way of making this point of collective responsibility, of Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh B'Zeh. They describe Noah as a righteous man in a fur coat and say that there are 2 ways of keeping warm on a cold night. Number 1, you can wear a fur coat. Or 2, you can light a fire. Wear a fur coat and you warm yourself. Light a fire and you warm others. The time is now to light a fire as a community. The threats are real, they're existential, and we all need to step up so we can continue to enhance our security preparedness and security capabilities. It is time for all of us to dig deeper than we ever have before. Thank you. Am Yisrael Chai.